And we're looking at Jack Drake. Jack, you here in town, are you?
Yes.
Are you?
We live here and have since I got out of law school.
You're gainfully employed here, are you?
I'm a lawyer, so is my wife Dottie, and our 3 children are grown and away from home, but one of them is still in school.
And what's the occasion here for this conversation?
Well, we're here to talk about the reunion, which the main event was yesterday, but it's continuing today and on through tomorrow. The reunion, the idea to have it in Tuscaloosa, I think was Tennis's idea, and he's done almost all of the work in connection with putting it on. I helped by doing some of the mailings and keeping up with the lists and that sort of thing. And he and I have talked a couple of times about what kind of event it ought to be and where it should be. And then he did all of the work in finding the place and planning the food and keeping up with who was coming and who had paid and that sort of thing.
Okay, fine. That's a comment from Jack Drake. And who's alongside you, Jack?
This is Barry McGuigan, who's married to Connie, and they live here in Tuscaloosa, actually in Northport also.
Hi, Barry. You had something to do with this too, did you?
A little bit. Connie got with her uncle, and they did a few things, and we agreed to open up our house to family members, and the children helped with some of the stuff on their computer, and Connie made a few of the little mementos and had the cake and a few things like that.
Great. Well, we've heard from a Drake and we've heard from a McEwen, but we haven't heard from a Jackson. And this was, I thought, a Jackson reunion. Is there a Jackson nearby?
There's a Jackson here.
Right there.
There's a Jackson. Who is this Jackson? Tennis Jackson.
This Tennis Jackson, right.
And he's the landlord here,
I'm
right?
the landlord at number 6 Bedford Place, Tuscaloosa.
Tell us a little bit about the activity.
Well, let me back up just to tell you a little bit. Now, Jack's name, they call him Jack because of his name is Jackson. So he's my sister's son, and they named him Jackson Russell Drake. We shortened it up and called him Jack. He not only has 2 lawyers, he and his wife lawyers, but he's got a 3rd lawyer coming up. His daughter's in law school. Now Barry, married my brother's daughter, Connie, and they got 3 boys, and they're fitting into this reunion well, and helping with the sound system, etc. This reunion happened on the basis of other reunions we've had, were smaller reunions. Our first one was in Patchogue about 5 years ago, and at your house, Dick, in Patchogue, when you had your big house, and we could not all get up there, not many of us, but we, along with your family, we must have had about 15 people there. And then last year, of course, we had one at your place in Key Largo. Of course, we have to keep switching around to catch up with you, because you're in the wintertime, and in the wintertime you're in Key Largo, in the summertime you're up in Long Island. But we find you and have these reunions. Anyway, I thought it was about time that we in Tuscaloosa contribute something to the Jackson reunion. And I volunteered last year when we were in Key Largo at your house that I would do it next time. So we worked out that November the 5th was probably the best time of the year to do it. It seemed to fit everybody, especially since we had 3 houses that could help to house some of the people here. Of course, we had to get a couple of motel rooms to the motel just 150 yards from my house, and we utilizing that to some degree. But, you know, I've been collecting addresses and phone numbers for a long time, and then Jack sent off the letters, and by phone and by fax and so forth, we got replies and commitments from about 35 people, and then we eventually had about 7 more to be added to the list. It came a little late, but not too late. It's never too late. And we ended up with a total of 42 who said they were coming. And they came from Tucson, Arizona, and Austin, Texas, and Milledgeville, Georgia, and Pensacola, and St. Joe, Florida, Tallahassee, and Calhoun, Georgia, and Birmingham, and Tuscaloosa, and Northport, and Key Largo. I don't think I've missed any place.
Lincoln, Alabama.
Where?
Cheryl lives in Lincoln.
Okay, Lincoln, Alabama. Okay. But after we had this many, I begun to search around to see where we're going to have it, and not many places will let you have their place for 2 days, and well, a day and a half is what it took. We had to go down one day before and do some decorating, and then on Saturday, the day of the celebration, the reunion was on Saturday. But this facility was perfect at the Salvation Army, because they had the facilities for the kitchen and sound system and a screen and nice soft seats in the chapel area, and they had a kitchen with a cook supplied with it, and they didn't make any charge, incidentally, for the use of the building. And I guess I'll be I'll take credit. I'm trying to find the right word. I'll take credit for having some influence over the getting the Salvation Army building. We just finished a financial capital fund drive to build some new facilities, which we're about outgrown about 10 to 1, and I was overwhelmingly the best collector of the whole pack. I got some friends that I met on the golf course some years ago, and we were trying to get $1.5 million, and it was just coincidental that I got over $500,000 worth of property given to us. The property is located in Birmingham, but that's no problem, because there's a real estate agent handling it for us anyway. So this friend of mine and some of his partners gave us 44 apartment units in Birmingham, and we're collecting rent on them. We've collected almost $50,000 rent since we were given those units the first of the year. And of course, the Salvation Army, being a church, doesn't have to pay any ad valorem tax on the property. However, we are supposed to sell this property in something after 2 years. We're required to keep it 2 years. So we had a good location to meet in, and of course, it had a good piano, and Tata played for us, and Dick Woodhull did all the photography for us, and we've all had a good time. And then on Sunday morning, there was a breakfast at a brunch at Shawnee's about 10:30, and we used that facility for a couple of hours, and then meeting over at my house at Bedford Place at the moment.
Well, that's wonderful, Tenny. It's great that you all did all those things, and now let's go on and see what the film looks like. That's it for the moment from, what is it, 6 Bedford Place? 6 Bedford Place. Okay, swell. Thank you so much. Tells you here. This is where it's happening today. It's the 5th, and all the Jacksons are going to gather around right in here and go right in that door there. And because I've been away, some of them have slipped in already. Let's wait and see if we can find where they are. There's the principal right there. The main mover. That's Tennis Jackson, and his brother Earl is back to it. And who have we got here? We're going to have to find out who they are. There's Betty Drake. You know her. Everybody knows Betty Drake. That looks like Jack Drake in the back. Is that Jack Drake over there? Who's that? Hey, Jack.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Good. Your family here?
Some of them. Nicole is here. Dottie's on her way. My mother's here. Cheryl's here.
Okay, we'll speak to them a little later.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Who's all these folks? Bunty? Say something. Say something nice to the camera. And who do we have here?
That is
Kenneth?
I think you should record that.
Who's that guy? Oh, I know her. Hey there. Oh, I love your dressmaker.
Thank you very much. Special made for me.
Good.
Made to fit? Yes, made to fit. In fact, it really is, because when I got up early to come to you, the nurse said, or she said, you sort of took scissors and cut off. It's too big.
And this is where we're going to sit down and partake of whatever smells so good here. Kenny, say something nice to the camera.
Well, I'm glad you could come, Mr. Woodhull, and I'm glad your bride got here. You know Jack Drake.
Oh, yes.
I've already been interviewed.
Yes.
Oh, well, it looks like almost everyone is here, and we'll soon be going into the chapel room so we can all sit down and we'll have a little conversation about what's going to take place, what we hope to take place.
Good.
I wonder whose glasses I'm all over just to lose them.
I wonder who is that talking behind me?
No, you're not going to.
Oh, yes.
How are you?
Come here, sweetie.
No.
Well, we have a...
Well, our mother and dad, I've heard them say when I was a kid that they wish they had a preacher. They had 3 boys. Wish they had a preacher and a doctor and a lawyer. And I guess this is the year we've come, except the lawyer is skipped a generation, and we got several in Jack Drake's family. One time I thought maybe I'd made a mistake by starting this thing, but it's been fun. I don't think this crowd has ever been together at one time, this big. we had a reunion at Patchogue at Jenna's place about 3 or 4 years ago, and a number of us went. And then we met at Key Largo, Florida, where we were going to stay in the wintertime. They keep switching back and forth every year. Anyway, they've got a beautiful place in Key Largo, and we went down there and stayed a week. And Earl went, and we had a good time. And I thought it was about my time to do something. And it was easier for us to do it here in Tuscaloosa because we have 3 families here in Tuscaloosa, and some are staying with me, and some are staying with Jack, and some are staying with Connie and Barry, and we are the families of the 3 host families. And I'm not going to try not to hog the program. What I would like to do, I got about 8 pages of beginning about the Jackson family, and a little bit of synopsis coming up to about now, I guess. And I'll just go through that. Today is November the 5th, Saturday, 1994. And we've all come a long way across the country to be together. Not necessarily in honor of, but because of the Jackson family, the Henry Fraley Jackson Sr. of Hancock County, Georgia, where Milledgeville was the largest town back at the turn of the century. They were farmers before the turn of the century, and the family had 6 boys and 3 girls, all of them working in the fields with sharecroppers to help them. One of the girls died at a very young age. The other 2 girls, Effie and Ruby Bass, married brothers who were farmers and lived nearby. They never made a lot of money, but they always had the basics, and I recall, and all of my brothers and sisters, I'm sure, recall having visited over there and had all the food in the world that you would want, and they had all the necessities and good, warm love that you could appreciate. Ruby married Curtis. She was the youngest child. And they never had any children, but they always had room for, Curtis had a sister who never married, and she stayed there. And our grandfather and grandmother, who was Fraley, and married Semmy. They called her Semmy. Her name was Mary Semmy Harris. And they lived with Curtis and Ruby in their latter years. Of the 4 older boys, they did various things. Some of them became farmers, and some ran mercantile stores and various types of things. I know one of them for sure had a grocery store with my dad, and must have been about 1915, 18, somewhere in there. Otis was the youngest son. He started out and came to Alabama visiting my dad. Started out as a railroad flagman for the L&N Railroad, and then he became a conductor. And when that sort of lost its luster, he became a cotton grader and traveled all around the South buying and selling cotton. And made a lot of money. He was considered to be a millionaire at one time, and he dressed and looked the part. Any of you that ever saw him, and we've got some pictures. If we ever get to some pictures, you can tell that he was movie star, big, and smoked a cigar, about that tall, and had his shirts ready-made, satin shirts and beautiful suits. when he retired from that, he operated the General Mercantile store in downtown Cullen. He died in 1956, and this was 2 or 3 years after his wife Ernestine had died. They never had any children. She was very interested in getting a good education, which she did, and she became the head of the department of the welfare department of Cullen. Now we come to the Henry Fraley Jr., and I never knew my dad was a junior till he died. It was written somewhere about his father, and I don't think Jenna knew it now. Most of you didn't know. I guess he was ashamed of it, you know. I've known some people who were, Junior, you coming here now? And then they get to detest that junior part, and they don't call me. So I guess my dad was one of those. He didn't like to be called Junior, and we never knew it. I guess he was afraid we'd call him Junior if we got mad. Anyway, all of us are in here related to him one way or the other, are very close. When he left the farm, probably in about 1904, at about age 16, 17 or so forth. I've written down here at the age of about 18. We don't know for sure, but about that age. He became an attendant in the State Insane Asylum in Milledgeville. And I gathered from talking to him a little bit about it, you know, you don't ever get enough information and write it down when you should. Some of you young people, if you ever want to keep up with some sort of history, write it down as you go and keep track of it. I don't know if it'll do any good, but for about 30 years I've been carrying one of these little things that I've got every day of the week, every month, and it's got 1994 on it. And I put down there, and I've gone back for 20, 25 years to look up information that I've forgotten when it happened, and I can find this book. So if you people want to keep up with what you're doing and what happened years ago, you do that. Anyway, my dad worked in this insane asylum for about a year or so, and it was evident that he was too smart to be stuck with the menial tasks that you have to do around an asylum, and he started going to night school. There's more than one story about how this happened, but I'm telling it like I heard it, and from my mother mostly, that he started night school and learned to be a telegraph operator. And when he graduated as a telegrapher, you might say he would be almost equivalent to sort of the only computer operator in Tuscaloosa County. You know, he was somebody. And the railroad was hiring telegraph operators. He had a sister, his older sister, Effie, was living in Birmingham. I bet BJ didn't know this. Effie was living in Birmingham, and her Tom Bass, Effie was, for some of you don't know, was one of my dad's sisters, Effie and Ruby. Tom probably, I think, was doing some construction work, and they wrote to my dad, Fraley, said, come on over here and the railroad will hire you. And this was probably 1906. And of course he was hired by the L&M Railroad and moved to Morris, one of the first jobs. And he became the most popular and best known person in town. They knew him more about the guy that ran the train station, because everything was done by train then, or horse and buggy. And because he was in charge of all the freight and all the money and all the telegrams and the mail and passengers in and out of Morris. He lived, when he first got there, he did not have a place to stay, and the Russell family lived across the street there, across the tracks from the station. And he stayed there 2 or 3 nights until he could find a rooming house, and he found one just 1 or 2 houses from there. inside of the track. But of course, by this time he had met my mother and Eva and Tallis and Russell, and their father was Jenny and Rufus Russell. The Russells had a good well out in their front yard, and the L&N station where Freya was working replenished their water supply, particularly drinking water from that well. And my mother Burley noticed that when she went to the well, soon there'd appear this tall, good-looking fellow. She said he got to be the thirstiest fellow he had. She had never seen. Is that right, Aunt Eva? Anyway, this courtship. Something I didn't write down, but I got it from a letter that I found from my mother had written to Bunty. Matter of fact, several years ago, Bunty told my mother to, why don't you write something down of the stuff that happened in your young. She wrote about 4 pages, and she said that before they were married, he got transferred not too far away, and she prayed for him to be returned to Mars. She said he didn't know it, but she had already fallen in love with him, but she wouldn't dare tell him anything like. But she prayed that he be returned, transferred back to Mars, and he was. And this led to their wedding, April the 25th, 1909. And they lived in Mars for several years, and lived in Decatur. And their first child was Gladys, was born in 1910 in Decatur. And then they had a child they named Russell, who was born in 1912. And Earl was born in 1916. Now you don't see Russell here because he died as a 2-year-old. I believe he was 2 years old. He had a lot of responsibility, and my dad, for some reason, needed a leave of absence, and he went back to Georgia with Burley and Gladys and Earl. Earl, you were born in Decatur? Yeah. Okay, in Decatur, Alabama. And they moved back to Georgia, and my dad and his brother Judson went into the grocery store business, and I have some information. Their place was at 103 McIntosh Street, Milledgeville. I'm sure that BJ probably knows where that was. They not only sold groceries, they helped name the newborn children of uneducated clients who came in the grocery store. They said some of those people come in, Miss Fraley, my wife going to have a child. Well, what would you suggest we name that child? Well, let's see. We'll name it here on this loaf of bread, Sunbeam. Name her Sunbeam. And they said many children are named just like that. By this time, Gladys was a big girl ready to start school, and her older brother had died earlier. But her next brother, Earl, kept her busy when she wasn't in school. She had to keep him out of the street, and out of the horse feed, and out of the chicken nest, and chicken water. And she did pretty good, except one time he got under the bed and got into a can of lye. And he survived that, but a few days later he got a bucket of syrup over his head. That called for another bath. She got her training there. I guess that's when you know Jim's been so clean all his life. He got good training on old Earl. In 1918, another son, A.P. Jackson, was born. Andrew Petty was his name. There was a Dr. Petty there in Milledgeville, and so they took that name as part of Bob's name. Of course, Bob is short for Andrew, and it was sort of odd that he went through school and they never had his name correctly. He went through school as Bob Jackson, Bobby Jackson. And I saw once or twice, my mother had written, I got a letter or two here, where she had written to somebody in Georgia who says Bobby is so-and-so, and then she spelled it B-O-B-B-I-E. Later we got it changed to B-O-B-B-Y and then Bob. And then they moved back to Birmingham on 50th Street and Division Avenue, and where in 1920 his third son Tennis was born, and I was named after a fellow by the name of Tennis Tidwell. He was a lawyer in Decatur, Alabama, and Tennis is I don't know where he got the name Tennis. I wondered and tried to find out one time, but I have encountered people whose surname is Tennis. One fellow from California wrote me a letter trying to find out how I got my name Tennis. And then there was a fellow stopped by my office 15 years ago or more or less, and I wasn't there, asked my secretary how I got my name Tennis, and his name last name was Tennis, and he wanted to get in touch with me, but he never did. But I guess the forerunner named the game of tennis, I'm not sure, but I'm happy with the name Tennis. If anybody hollers Tennis and nobody answers but me, I think odd names are an asset to some degree. You know, our mother's family had brother, her brother was named Tellis. That's not a usual name, and the other one was Erskine. And Eva, you don't see her at Eva. You know, you don't run across that many Evas. All sort of unusual names. Anyway, my dad was back in Birmingham and resumed his job with the railroad. We're living there in Woodlawn. And when he got word, probably by telegraph, that I had been born, he didn't wait for his normal transportation. He walked 2 or 3 miles back down the track to get to home and see how his family was. And as soon as the new terminal station was built in Birmingham, he was assigned there as a foreman to oversee all in and out freight, money, postal delivery that came in or out of Birmingham by train. And all the trains, Southern and L&N and Frisco, and all of them came into this station. And I remember walking with him, and for a little boy walking in front of all these big trains, puffing and steam shooting in all directions. But I had a very secure feeling. You know how a little child would hold a grown man's finger. I remember holding his finger like that. Soon after I was born, came the daughter in 1922, named Virginia. Burley's Eva's mother was named Virginia. They call her Jenny, and our sister is called Jenny or Jenna. We called her Jenna. I think when she went to New York, they changed to Jenny, but it's about the same, not much different. Yankees just don't know how to pronounce Jenna. And this place in Woodlawn, where both of us were born, I've got a picture of the house in my reel there. It's torn down. I went by there about 5 years ago, and there's a warehouse there. In 1925, Burley and Fraley felt the need to upgrade their household to a new house, a little further from downtown, but convenient to the tram and the school. The new house was at 8533 Division Avenue. I didn't have to look it up remember that, I just remember that address always well, I guess. It had a central heating system. This is 1925, and not many people had central heating system in 1925. It had a garage out back and all the utilities. There was alleys built on those streets that were laid out. Alleys ran across behind all the houses in there and all the utilities. You didn't have poles sticking out in front making the place look bad. All the utilities came from the alley out back. On May the 10th, 1927, when getting home from school, which was just 1 block away, I found the front door locked. And I rang the doorbell. And a black nurse in a stiff white uniform came and said, "You must be Tennis." I said, "That's right." I wonder how she knew my name, Tennis. She said, "Well," she said, "your mother said for you to go with your 2 brothers to the golf course. They're going now." And I looked down the sidewalk, and there they go. And she said, "You run along now and play golf with them, and when you get back, you can see your little baby sister. Your mother's got a little baby girl in here named Elizabeth Jean Jackson." And of course, she's forever been called Betty Jean or Bet or Betty. And I was sick. That's when I started playing golf. Incidentally, I'm supposed to be playing golf Saturday. Well, Freda had his hands full of children by this time. 6 children to feed and clothe. And he decided even long before that he needed some spare money. So he bought himself a great big touring car, a Chandler. It would hold 6 or 7 passengers. It had fold-down seats and big wide open, wide seat, open touring car without windows. You pin up curtains when it got cold. And they did okay until the driver became disoriented about whose money he was taking in and who owned the car. So that ended that business. It didn't work out. And he sold the car. But the 3 boys kept caddying and playing golf while Gladys was attending Woodlawn High School and playing the piano with an orchestra. After graduating, Gladys found an office job as a stenographer, and she also found in that orchestra was a banjo picker who played well and looked pretty good too. After they'd known each other for a while, I think he worked for Swift and Company, either Armour or Swift, I think it's Swift. He got transferred to Georgia, Atlanta. And it is true that absence makes the heart grow fonder, because that boosted the business of the post office special delivery department. It came from Atlanta to this special delivery and to me. I was on the front porch every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock to wait for that delivery man. And then give it to Tom. But this time Earl had entered Woodlawn High School. And while the next 3 children, Bob, Tennis, and Jenner, were in Robinson School, which is, as I say, just 1 block away. And then the Depression hit. Didn't affect us as much as it did a lot of other people, but the railroad cut back on that work, and our dad didn't work full time. And he decided he needed to get his family out in the country where the payments were cheaper, and maybe he could have room for a garden. At that particular house, we only had room for a little garden, and of course, our dad being brought up on a plantation in Georgia, he always needed to be growing something, cows or vegetables or something, and he always did. So we moved out, the family moved out to, what's the name of the place, somebody?
No. Oh,
Joketown.
oh, the mountain. Oh, yeah. Near Oxnard.
I've written it down here somewhere. Anyway, we moved out there to about 16 acres, Oak Grove. About 16 acres, and all except Gladys, she had married at this time or was about to. And it was a big house, and the house was built so that they could shut one door in part of it, and the Russell family lived in the smaller section of the house, and we other Jacksons lived in the larger portion of the house. This was Tellis Russell, Tellis and Pauline, my mother's brother. And it was big enough, the farm was big enough for large gardens and barns and a few cows and pigs and chickens and you know, raise a little corn for the animals, that kind of thing. And this only lasted a little over a year. We sort of agreed that we would, family would get out. My dad found us the house in Gardendale that was 10 miles north of Birmingham. A 5-acre place with a house and a garage with a room above it, a chicken house, and 200 chickens, 200 laid chickens came with the deal. And there was a room at the end of the chicken house we called the barn, and we could have a cow and whatever in that area. And of course that kept his 3 boys and 2 girls busy. And my dad was in his element because he had space that he could call his own and direct and show his boys how to work, and with no distracting elements around like golf or baseball or anything like that. And soon he had more chickens and pens full of pigs and lots of cows and fruit trees and gardens, and it was a good time. He bought some other land on occasion and rented some land so that we could work harder, and we did. Of course, he worked harder than we did. He would get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and do some of his chores. And then he'd go to work. That varied over the years. Some years he'd have to go an hour early because of how the train, what time the trains come in, because he had to get that his main job was to pick up a big satchel, using those couriers with big satchels of money. And he had other people he would direct to be in charge of the freight and fish can barrels and that kind of thing. And he would have this bag of money latched to his arm, and that was his till he got to some other place or to the bank or some place where he turned over money. Money was transferred from banks to one bank in Atlanta, say the banks in Birmingham. Then he'd be back home about 4 o'clock, and we'd be home from school about that time. We'd all start working again and feed the chickens and gather the eggs and do the garden, that kind of thing. You know, our mother Burley was a person who had lots of love and understanding, and who especially knew how to handle children, especially little boys, when they're growing up and trying to learn the real principles of how to be honest people. And she once made me return a pocket full of pecans. I was about 10 years old, and I had picked them up on the sidewalk coming from the golf course. And I thought, well, you know, they're on the city property, so they couldn't belong to this lady that lives here. And I put them in my pocket and got on with a pocket full of pecans. And that was my explanation to her that those weren't Mrs. So-and-so's that belonged to the city, and I just picked up what belonged to the city. Well, she stood out in front and watched me cry all the way back to this lady's house, about 100 yards away, to return those pecans, which I did, and apologized. Even long before this, so she knew what to do with little boys who were 6 and 8 and 10 years old. She found out somebody had broken a rule, and she wanted to find who the guilty party was. She lined us all up and said, I know who the guilty party is, but I'm just going to line you all up. and she took her shoe off and says, "I'm going to hit the one that did that." And she drew back and to hit, and of course the guilty party died. And I've wondered about whether the guilty party died or I know one time I blamed on one of my brothers that it was my birthday cake and nobody was to touch it. And I sneaked in when no one was looking, and they had the icing off the top. And then I think one of my brothers got the blame, and I didn't say anything. Anyway, Burley was right smart with children. And my dad would be tough on us sometimes. He gave us tough love. You know, we didn't do what we wanted to. He spanked all of us over the years. But it was tough love, so-called, to love a child enough to give it discipline and teach them, you know. But my mother, as I say, was the kind of person who was understanding and a little easier on us, and she would defend us on occasion, and has for me and the others too, I'm sure. And anyway, they taught us, loved us enough to take the time to give us discipline and training, and of course, discipline and training is probably the two most important ingredients in bringing up children. Tell them not to get rid of the food, but Jackson will be through.
I think it's out and ready.
I got one more page.
Okay.
These are only a few of the facts about Burley and Fraley. We'll go in.
Hey, Danny, I want to say one thing. I don't know if you know this, but Mama told me, or somebody told me that Mama never let Dad kiss her until they were married. Now time to change.
I have that in a message. I have that written out in another piece of information. She said, I never let him kiss me until we got married. All right, we're all going in here to eat, and we'll probably come back in here to see some pictures, but we got lots of things to do, and I hope the day's long enough to do it, and I took probably 5 minutes longer than I should here. We're on time.
The only thing this camera does not capture is the good odors, the smells that are coming out of that kitchen. And how people waited as long as they did to get in there, I'll never know. But they aren't waiting now. They're going to come right on in and chow down to good old food.